Listen, I appreciate everybody joining. My name is Baxter Lanius. I'm actually the CEO and founder of Alternative Payments, and we've been partnered with NSA for a few months now, and gotten to know Susan and the team. And I'm really excited to start really our first webinar series as a part of many others. And the items that we really want to focus on today really relate to a topic that's super important in relation to payments, but often goes untalked about, and that's really around compliance and the fragmentation of payment infrastructure for accounting businesses, CAS businesses, and also has some applications to the broader services and recurring services based businesses. So the agenda for today is really to talk one about kind of how fragmented invoice billing and payments are in the ecosystem. Two, double click on some of the specific compliance challenges that companies face, especially if you're managing accounts receivable for your clients, right? You're kind of multiplying the potential challenge and friction there. Talk a little bit about reporting and reconciliation and how to do so effectively and in a streamlined fashion. Um, Go into maybe really what good and maybe great looks like for these work streams, and then get into about talk a little bit about alternative payments and how we fit into this broader landscape. Again, if you guys have questions or thoughts, please feel free to jump in and ask away. Um, so one of the biggest challenges in this market, and as you think about invoice billing, payments and reconciliation, accounts receivable automation, getting paid, is oftentimes this data lives in many different systems. I think if you're best in class, all of this data lives in one system. It's very, very streamlined. But oftentimes things live on a pen and paper. Customer information lives in a quoting system. Payment information lives in a processing system. And so you basically have these multiple different components and fragmented data sets across the board, that not only exposes you to compliance risk, it also just becomes really, really hard to manage. Um, so this is probably the biggest opportunity for a lot of businesses, which is how do you start to aggregate and consolidate this information into one setup? And how do you ensure that you have a process from quote to cash to streamline the workflow? I got off the phone with a mid-sized accounting firm earlier today, and they had payment information that sat in an Excel sheet. And so every single month, they would basically copy and paste the payment method into their processor and process that transaction. Now, that's obviously not what we would recommend from a business perspective, but that's the way a lot of processes are done here, and so where are those opportunities? Um, as the world also moves more digitally, you know, the core piece of is how do you get information within a source of record software? And so many of you guys may be using CCH Access, you may be using Thomson Reuters, you may be using just QBO. That would be your source of record software for this information. And how do you double check and confirm that all of this information is living in one standalone system? Um, Oftentimes the payment information is separated, and that's really where we see the opportunity come in for alternative payments and for a lot of online payment options. Now, if we switch to the next page here, one of the biggest challenges and the biggest compliance issues that we see is regarding PCI compliance. So PCI compliance governs credit card data. It's a compliance protocol that started with the card networks, so Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, um, to really reduce risk in the world, and so that bad actors cannot grab card information and payment information and just process credit cards left and right? And so then fraud increases. The goal is for all of this information to be tokenized and held in a PCI compliant fashion to not expose your business for risk, but the system, right? of risk. And so PCI compliance governs this and actually fines companies that are not PCI compliant in the management of credit card data specifically. This does not apply to bank account information, interestingly enough, because it's a different body that governs the compliance and risk associated with bank account information. So it only applies to credit card information. And what does it mean? This means basically that if you are holding credit card information, you are responsible for holding that information in a PCI compliant, tokenized, encrypted fashion. And if you don't live up to those expectations, then there is an opportunity for the card networks to fine you for not holding this information in a properly sensitive manner. Um, so going through this slide in specific detail, right? We talked a little bit about what is PCI compliance. So this is all card number, expiration date, CVV number. It governs the entire system, right? So it doesn't matter if you're small business, mid-sized business, large enterprise. It is the governing body. There are you can search Google or use Claude and understand what kind of fines the networks have put down on people, but it's pretty significant, especially if there's a breach or especially if there's an issue. And why is this important? This is important because when a client calls and says, "Hey, my credit card's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6," writing that on a piece of paper is obviously not the best way to handle this information. And it's important that you are part of the solution to properly secure the information. Um, we see this information in a bunch of different ways, right? This could be in Excel files, this could be in PDFs, this could be in quotes, this could be in um, applications, right? And oftentimes, I think the most common thing is really upon onboarding of a client, you send a form out, you say, "Hey, please submit your payment information." And the client submits his payment information, and then you have a PDF that has the credit card information on file. There are certainly better ways and more sophisticated ways to do that. And to do that in a safe fashion to reduce your potential liability and compliance. Same thing on the end client side, right? It's super important that if you are managing accounts receivable for your end clients, you are using best in class protocol to capture and safeguard their information. As you can imagine, in this day and age, bad actors are constantly trying to get access to credit card information, run credit cards, and evaluate what they can potentially get away with. Um, Breaches do occur, and generally, if you think about the liability is probably from five to $100,000. So it can be a sizable liability. And again, it's important that we're all doing our part in terms of educating our clients, educating our friends, family about this potential liability, and how do we, as business owners, do the best thing for ourselves, but then also for our clients. Um, the other big compliance gap that we see in the market really is reporting and reconciliation. And so, obviously, as business owners, it's incredibly important to always track down the cash as much as possible and have a clear understanding of where cash sits in the system. So, when someone pays an invoice, did you receive that cash? Right? Is that invoice reconciliation, bank reconciliation? And how do you match that pattern up so that when Joe pays me, I know where my AR balance is, and I'm properly accounting for that for that transaction. Um, when you then start to use multiple systems to process transactions, whether you're using your direct bank for bank account transactions, you're using a processor like Stripe for credit card transactions, you obviously are adding a tremendous amount of complexity to your existing invoices. And it's important to streamline that as much as possible so that invoice reconciliation, your AR balance is streamlined, as well as cash reconciliation is streamlined. Um, there's also additional complexity around 1099s and proper reporting to the IRS in terms of track record with these processors. That is an important item to note. Um, when you then also have different lines of business and maybe you have specific contracts that have recurring payments attached to them, also tracking that and reconciling that and ensuring that that's in line is also another key component. Um, we're all obviously probably all on this call, at least accountants, and very familiar with, we may not all be CPAs, but very familiar with income statement and gross to net calculations. And this is another piece that we always need to be wary of and cautious of, which is how are we um, booking different transactional fees. You may have some processors that pay you net, and so your bank account actually says $97, but the invoice is for $100. And if you're booking revenue at $97, you're not obviously booking or taking into consideration the transaction cost of that transaction. And so making sure that, from a compliance perspective, we are reporting on our books and records in an accurate fashion is important. There's also chargeback fees, there's dispute fees. There are a lot of different fees in this kind of credit card processing, bank processing arena, and ensuring that we're properly reporting gross to net revenue is certainly a consideration from a compliance perspective. Um, the third piece is really around just authorization. And so when we think about ACH transactions, whether you're pulling funds from your client, are you properly authorized to do that? Are your clients properly authorized to do that as it relates to recurring billing? Same thing within credit card transactions. So if you do have a managed contract, are you contractually allowed to process his or her credit card on the first of the month? And are we going all the way upstream to the contract process with your clients to ensure that that's all very, very organized on your side? Um, so we've hit on a bunch of these compliance kind of components around payments. Many of these items are obviously subtle as it relates to payments. I think payment processing is one of the most important things as part of a business because it's all tied to how you get paid and how you process payments. But it also opens us all up to these compliance challenges. And the key question is, well, are we utilizing the best system or the best platform, or how are we plugging these gaps for ourselves? But then also, given our relationship with all of our clients, are we plugging those gaps for our clients and helping that advise them on some of this friction and how to plug those gaps. Um, Now talking a little bit about what does good look like, right? And what do we think best in class looks like? Um, we think about it really in four key categories. The first is tokenization, right? So all card data should be tokenized. Um, every single processor tokenizes it themselves, but if you have credit card information in an Excel file, on a Microsoft Word document, in a PowerPoint, in a PDF, obviously it's not tokenized, and that can expose you to risk. In the same light, it's super important that you're using a payment processor that is PCI compliant and is PCI certified. By definition, if they're PCI certified, then they are tokenizing their information for you, but then also obviously for your clients. Um, Third key piece is this unification process, right? So if you are utilizing multiple sources of record software, do you have a unified source of truth from a card information, bank account information? Are you storing that information in one system that can then process transactions in a seamless fashion? Um, this is always a complicated one because you may also be using two source of record softwares, right? And so, how do you ultimately streamline this workflow and unify the workflow? Um, and then the fourth piece is this audit trail component, right? So, every transaction that gets processed, every authorization, every payment that's made by a client, 9 times out of 10, you won't need this information. But having an audit trail will help you in the event that there are edge cases or there are concerns from your clients. I mean, we've seen this as a processor, we've seen this a lot where an end client didn't know they were being charged $15 or $1,000 or $5,000, and providing that audit trail to our clients who are utilizing our software, can be really, really valuable as you think about how you position your business. Um, so, who are we? What do we do? How do we fit into the market? We are a payments automation business, very focused on creating a seamless experience for you and your clients. That solution is fully integrated into your current tech stack. So we integrate with a lot of tooling so that the customer information, the invoice information that lives somewhere else is redisplayed in real time into our tooling. And so that allows us to basically be an extension of your source of record software. Your source of record software is obviously the most critical component of payments, right, and of billing. And this saves you a step of manually taking information from one record and sticking it into another service or software solution to then bill based off of. Excuse me. This integration ultimately streamlines that quote to cash process, that invoice billing, payments, and reconciliation process, because every single time a payment's made, every single time a dispute happens, every single time a transaction's funded into your bank account, we are recording all of the information back to that source of record software, which makes managing receivables and invoices infinitely easier, which makes automating payments and auto pay infinitely easier, which makes dunning emails and invoice reminders and summary invoices infinitely easier. And that has allowed us to, grow very, very quickly within the services based ecosystem, but really specifically for accountants and their clients, because many of our accounting partners love this software to utilize with their clients through a single pane of glass, which I will get to in a second. Yep. All of this data is tokenized on our side. So, from a PCI compliance perspective, again, we tokenize everything. We're encrypted. We're PCI compliant, which allows you to process payments in a compliant fashion. We automate the entire workflow. So the entire AR workflow. I'm sure many of you sitting here are like, "Oh my gosh, there's no way this can be automated." Um, it is, and it can be. And it starts with invoicing and goes to billing, payments, and reconciliation. The entire process. A lot of our clients are processing hundreds, if not thousands, of invoices a month. And now that entire process, dunning notices, is fully automated. Yeah. What does that drive? That really just drives this reduction in collections. So if you look at the industry as a whole, in SMBs as a whole, generally SMBs are getting paid in 35 to 40 days. We're able to reduce that down to 5 days. And so the actual tangible reduction in DSO and day sales outstanding is massive. Now, I'm going to walk a little bit through the product just so you kind of have a taste of kind of where we sit in and hit this home a little bit. Um, the first piece of this is the end client facing portal, and what do your clients really see, and how do your clients experience the brand itself. So here what you'll see is a example end client facing portal for a company called ISG Technology. It's fully branded, their experience. It looks like it's part of your business and part of your brand. And then from there, what we're doing is we're redisplaying the invoices from that source of record software into this portal so that they can manage that relationship with your business. So right now, there are three invoices that are outstanding. There are two invoices that have been paid. Your end client can then view payment methods that are on file. They can opt into auto pay. They can add team members to the account, and they can obviously very, very quickly pay in 1 to 2 clicks here. The other thing I'll mention that's interesting is this Teams functionality. So You may support, let's say, a landlord, and that landlord may um, have multiple different locations. And that landlord can then use different payment methods by location. So we'll get into the multi-tenant experience in a second, but super duper valuable experience and feature when it relates to this multi-tenancy. Now, how do we automate this is the key question, and how do we govern the automation? This is really the sweet spot for that automations functionality and where that sits in the landscape. So automations and reconciliation. All of these email notifications that can be sent out from your domain, from your company email addresses. So when a client replies, it goes directly to you. And it creates them that connectivity, right? And that brand alignment, which gets them to respond and engage with those email notifications. You can send those out in fully customizable fashion. So here you'll see a tremendous number of templates, template number one, two, three, four, five. You can set it up to different frequencies. You can customize these emails as you see fit. You can also send out summary emails. So there's a difference between obviously an invoice reminder versus a summary email saying that there are multiple invoices that are outstanding, and then you can use one-off notifications as well. So if you want to drive a big campaign to try to get payment methods on file, if you want to try to engage with your customers in different ways, you can use our solution as kind of a MailChimp type comp to again drive the engagement. All of these emails are sent out, and you can immediately reconcile who's received what, um, whose emails have been read, whose emails have been delivered. So you also never get into this circumstance where you have a client who says, "Oh, I never received your bill," or your client has a client who says, "Oh, I never received your bill," right? And so managing that experience is going to be super important because it allows you to hold your clients and your clients' clients responsible for that engagement. Um, the other big thing is the reconciliation, which we talked about, right? So invoice reconciliation and cash reconciliation. Now, what does this all mean? I know I've only highlighted a few workflows, but what this really means is really three things as I think about it. Your time to pay gets reduced significantly, which we talked about. Um, Auto pay is really going to be the biggest driver of that. So the more clients you can get on auto pay for recurring services, the more opportunity you're going to have to bring down your day sales outstanding. And even in some of these email reminders features, some of you may be thinking like, oh, well, that's not going to have an impact. The data has an impact, and the data will tell you otherwise. That if you turn on email reminders in an automated fashion, your day sales outstanding will be reduced by about 66%, from 6 days to 2 days. And that incremental email reminder drives a tremendous amount of actionability within your business. So, again, what does this do? This is saving you and your clients time from manual work. This is accelerating cash flow, and it's also strengthening your compliance and your security and reducing risk and liability for your business. There's one question here. Um, we're evaluating a bunch of different integrations on the tax and accounting side. So if there are integrations that you guys are utilizing that you want us to integrate with, feel free to reach out to me. I'll share my email at the end of the call, and would love to hear that. I think right now where we just finalized an integration with CCH Access, where we're talking to Thomson Reuters as well. So as these integrations come up, more than happy to discuss and figure out how to integrate with them. We integrate with all of the leading accounting software solutions, so QBO, QBD, Zero, Wave, Business Central, NetSuite, Dynamics, like the list goes on, both at the ERP level as well as the accounting level. Um, Now, one of the things that we always like to address in these calls, because this comes up frequently, is, well, how do you really sorry, there's another question here. Um, yeah, so one other question is transitioning from different providers. So what we see a lot is it depends on the processor that you're utilizing, but companies like Stripe um, will allow us to integrate quite seamlessly and grab all that payment method to do what's called a payment migration. So all of that credit card information that's on file, all of that ACH information that's on file, we can transition in a fully encrypted manner, set up your account, and so that your end client doesn't need to do anything um, from a payment perspective. So, think about it like this: your end client logs in to an end client experience, um, which looks like this, and their payment method is already on file. All they have to do is two click to make a payment, and so it's a really really seamless experience for them. A couple of the other objections that we hear, because I think a lot of our clients are processing payments online, but there are a handful of clients that are still processing via check. um, is a couple things, and I'm going to go over these each one specifically because I find them pretty real. First one, I'm not comfortable entering my bank or credit card information online. Um, there are two things that I think are really fascinating about this point. One is, obviously we're PCI compliant and the data is fully encrypted and tokenized, and we actually don't even have access to the data because the data is tokenized. And then when the transaction occurs, we're just pulling down a token. The second piece of this is when a customer sends you a check, they're actually handing you the keys to their bank account, right? If you look at the bottom of any check, you have an ACH and routing number on that check. And with that information, you have the ability to pull funds directly from that bank account, which again exposes them to a tremendous amount of risk. Um, Another objection that we hear quite frequently is I'm used to mailing checks, and I want to stick to mailing checks. Um, and at the end of the day, right, the key piece here is online payments are faster. They get you paid faster, and they also streamline the reconciliation process much more easily. So, talking people away from checks, if you look at check usage in the industry, um, it's it's going down significantly. I think in 2005, tech usage was at like 85% of the entire B2B payments landscape, and now it's at 30%. So again, gone down, and it's going to continue to come down. Third kind of P piece is, what if I forget to make a payment? What if I forget to engage? And this auto pay type of experience really reduces that complexity, and ensures that there's a payment method on file. And so you're paying your bills on time. We all have these types of experiences, right? Where you forget to log into the utility company, they shut off service. You forget to pay the cable bill, they shut off service. Or maybe I'm just talking talking for myself. But you know, it's obviously important for some of these services to make payments on time, and this gives you that flexibility and control to do so. Um, this is another really good one, which is, I like having a paper trail and physical proof of payment. Um, and this is an important one, I think, for some people. But we have really really robust audit logs, and that you can download and you can engage with, and you can really see who's doing what, when, where, why, which gives you that track record, and gives you those records. A few other things, right? From a customer success perspective, I really consider us just customer obsessed. We build things specifically for customers, um, to build out our platform. We have best in class support. You can, talk to somebody on the phone. You can schedule Zooms with our customer success team. We believe in that white glove type of service to ensure that we're able to drive online adoption for your business. As online adoption increases for your business, we obviously also get paid because of it, and so we're incentivized to drive as much adoption as we can drive. Now, the last thing I'll mention is really regarding our referral program. We've built this specifically for accountants, bookkeepers, CPAs, tax firms in mind around how do we incentivize you to offer a best in class service to your client while also receiving some sort of monetization tied to it. Um, Managing accounts receivable through a single pane of glass makes your life a lot easier. It's another service that you can also sell and that you can monetize, assuming you've automated it with our software. And so this creates the best connected type of relationship between our business and your business. And so we offer a referral revenue share of 10%, which happens in perpetuity, assuming that the client is still a customer. Those payments are made quarterly. Your referrals will also receive 10% off alternative payments as standard pricing for their first 12 months. So it's this give get dynamic, right, of offering a discount. Um, we've built in this one click experience on the referral side. So you can manage actually all of your referrals from inside your platform. You can see your entire customer base. You can click refer. You can streamline that workflow, which is really, really cool. And then we also have a partnerships team that helps you with any materials or support information as to how do you drive the next referral and how do you engage with your clients in that regard. This is, the second to last page here, just regarding the snapshot of what this referral looks like and how do people engage with it. So, as I mentioned, right, all of your clients would get locked into this referral system. You can manage it really, really easily. You can manage payouts. You can manage that engagement. You can manage if you sent alerts or not, and then you can customize the entire referral experience for your clients. At the end of the day, if you can manage your AR for your clients out of one pane of glass, as well as managing your own business's AR, it streamlines the workflow for you and takes something like payments, which are really, really difficult to manage, in one seamless type of experience to benefit both sides, both your business as well as your end clients. In again, the most compliant fashion that exists today. So with that, guys, we really appreciate all the time. Here's my information. If you're interested in booking a demo or you're interested in getting in touch, feel free to reach out directly. If you guys have any questions, would love to connect about any of this regarding accounts receivable, invoicing, billing, and payments. And thank you so much for all your time and have a wonderful day.